Hello there, people of the internet. I am making this video in an effort to earn my way up to 100,000 subscribers, so hopefully this gets you guys on board. And if not, then that's fine. I will try again tomorrow. I'm going through everything inside of my arsenal here, and I'm showing off history and development and what these are, where they came from, why they exist. And, well, if you like this kind of stuff, then, like I said, subscribe to the channel, because I'm trying to put out a video on these every single day. Doesn't always work out like that, but boy am I trying. I covered the M1 Garand, and I covered the M1 Carbine, and I covered the 1917 and 1903 variant rifles, and I've covered all sorts of stuff on this so far. So up next, we're going to go ahead and cover the M14, or I guess the M1A with the civilian example. Now, I don't own an M14, and, well, those are very hard to come by because they are select fire. But what I do have is this Mini 14, which I will use for representation purposes for the M14 platform. So first off, before we start with all of that, let's go ahead and talk about what was going on during the time period where this, not this rifle, but the M14 was being made. This was right after World War II, and the United States was very much used to using its self-loading M1 Garand chambered in 30-06. This right here using in-block clip, which I'm sure all of you want to hear go ping. But we have the in-block clip. Let's see if this makes Kevin scream. Ah, look at that, and I even caught it. Hell yeah. But in-block clip with this old school style of battle rifle. And the United States was seeing the writing on the wall and seeing the better options for your battle rifle. It was becoming pretty well known that intermediate caliber cartridges were going to be the wave of the future, and the United States was looking into various options for that. Ultimately, they adopted the, well, what would become 7.62 NATO, and this was basically identical. It for all intents and purposes, mimicked the M2 ball round that the United States was using at the time, which was a 30-06 round. It was a 150 grain projectile traveling at about 2,800 or so feet per second, but it was a smaller case length that still achieved those same ballistic capabilities. Now, the United States didn't really do all that great in terms of picking an intermediate cartridge, because their intermediate cartridge was still mimicking the full power round, and that kind of negates the idea of having an intermediate cartridge. But what the United States was also looking at was the external magazines that were becoming very much predominant for the time period. There were all sorts of different options for all sorts of different firearms that were being explored by the newly formed NATO forces, and NATO was wanting to standardize for logistical reasons. If something ever happened with some other country, we all know what country, but if something ever happened with some other country and another world war were to start up, NATO wanted to standardize on one particular cartridge that they would be able to use for basically all of their forces. This, for logistical reasons, would be ideal, and having one standard particular rifle would also be one of the very good ways to go. But the United States, although there were other cartridges being explored for NATO and other firearms being explored for NATO, the United States was very, what's the word I'm looking for? They liked their M1 Garand systems, and they like the systems that are based off of Garand's rotating bolt system. So the M14 clearly drove a lot of inspiration from Garand's design. Anytime that you compare the M1 Garand to the M14, you can see a lot of similarities. Now, the original M14s were designed to be select fire. This was completely uncontrollable. 7.62 NATO in full auto is something that you just cannot control with a shoulder-fired rifle, so they did eventually branch off to having those be strictly self-loading semi-autos that just had an external magazine that you could load in versus having to use in-block clips like you do with your Garand system. The gas system was a little bit different. As a matter of fact, they took a lot of aspects sort of from the gas system from the M1 Carbine, with some various changes. The gas system from the Carbine has a gas tappet system inside of it that actually has a little piston that moves back and forth. And the M14 gas system is different than the gas system of the carbine or the M1 Grand, but if you look at the two side by side, you could see how there was definitely some inspiration chosen from the gas habit system of the M1 carbine and even the gas system of the M1 Grand. Now on our M14 or Mini 14 here, this right here, just with the way that it's designed and how it doesn't have a piston system inside of it, this right here operates more like a DI gun than anything else, just with the way that the bolt carrier and gas system is all just one specific piece that moves backwards whenever it is hit with the gases and whatnot. So this is not a really good, accurate representation of the gas system that you would expect with the M14. Otherwise, I would probably just pull this apart and show you guys. But external magazines were going to be the wave of the future. Select fire rifles were going to be the wave of the future. The United States tried, did not work out for their select fire capabilities. They did, however, keep the external magazines. As time would progress, technology would progress, firearms mounting applications would progress and whatnot. The United States would eventually get around to adopting the M16 systems to replace the M14 systems, but that would be later down the road. That's another scope of technology. Now, the M14 system, although it does have that external mag, the external mags can be finicky from my experiences. They're a rock and lock style, and they just don't really lend themselves to be all the greatest. There are plenty of rock and lock systems that were around at the time. It was absolutely acceptable for that particular time period, but nowadays where everything is push button, mag out, mag in, it's definitely a, by modern standards, it's not something that I would want to rely on being able to get those motor functions down to be able to reliably do in the heat of a conflict. Now, the M14, I think it mostly saw use in Vietnam, and it did prove to have its issues, but the M16 absolutely had way more issues during its beginnings, and we'll go ahead and we'll cover some of those issues on another video. The M14 did not have a whole lot of service life, clearly based off of the previous designs that the United States military was using. They tried opting for that intermediate cartridge, did not work out. They did move to external mags, huge step in the right direction, but other various full power rifles that were out there on the markets that were kind of replacing the previous generation weapon. I use that term really loosely because the previous generation weapons were like World War II era weapons, but those were still very predominant for that time period. But the next generation of intermediate, I use that term very loosely, intermediate battle rifles, essentially, to replace the older generation of battle rifles. There were much better options out there. The M14, whenever it was produced, was pretty much an antiquated design right from the get-go. Whereas other platforms such as the FAL or the G3 or, insert your choice of battle rifle here, that had a more, what's the word I'm looking for? It could be adapted to modern standards better than the traditional style of fighting rifle. Those rifles were definitely going to be a much better option, but the United States still decided to go ahead and go with the M14 option. We have an exposed rotating bolt. We have complete incapabilities to be able to control it in full auto fire. We very much still have a full power rifle cartridge. There were definitely some downsides to the M14 platform for what it is that the U.S. was looking to do. Eventually, they did move on to using 5.56, and that pretty much negated all of those issues. And then we had the M16, which caused a bunch of issues in itself, and that is a topic for another video. So I got a couple of rounds of 223 here. This right here is not in M1A or in M14, but this is all I have to go ahead and represent it. So I'm just going to send some rounds of 223 downrange. This is full metal jackets, 55 grains. This should be traveling at about 3,200 feet per second or so out of a barrel length like this. Don't really know what I'm going to aim at. Let's go for that TV there. Oh, the TV got shot. Let's go for the rim of that car. I thought I had more ammo inside of this thing, but this is just a 5-round magazine. I thought I had another round in there though, but you know how that song and dance goes. Sometimes you just miscount your ammunition whenever you're loading your rifle. Anyway, folks, thanks for watching. I do appreciate your time. This was kind of a quick run through for the M14 rifle. There's a lot that I left out, but I think that I covered the general gist of most of that firearms history and whatnot without going into any real specifics. So I'm going to say thanks for watching. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Hopefully this did earn your subscription. Yeah, if not, I'll try again tomorrow because I'm trying to put out one of these videos every day where I talk about the history of some of these platforms. So if you want to be around for that, then go ahead and be around for that. If not, I'll try to catch your attention later. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and clean up my mess here because I've got a bunch of stuff out here now. I've got a whole table full of stuff. I gotta carry it back. We got a heat index today of 115 and a humidity of like 80%. It is terrible out here. I'll see you guys on the next episode. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Gary. Shame that bolt action shotguns aren't more mainstream.